hello, and a very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining me for this diabetes special blue light chat. For those of you who don't know why I'm sitting in blue light, it's for two reasons. One, obviously I'm a fierce proponent and supporter of our boys and girls on the front line, and rather than just clapping for them once a week, I think how can we do things to make things good for them and productive? So that's the first thing. The second reason is also it's part of my recovery from a traumatic brain injury. So now we've got that out of the way, I'm absolutely delighted to be able to share with you a special interview that I came across this morning from Amanda Epps, who's a diabetes specialist nurse working out of the Medway region, I believe. She's going to correct me if I got that wrong in a sec, because she's also on the line. And the point that I need to be really, really clear with all of you about in this COVID world is it is not just COVID-19, okay? You wouldn't imagine it in terms of if you look at the media and you look at the state that people are getting themselves into about it. Rightly so, it's a serious thing. We need to take it seriously, of course. But we cannot let medicine go into the dark ages as a result. So 3-4 weeks ago, the Daily Telegraph front page was about how normal elective care plummeted. Obviously, it got switched off overnight, that's fine. But it wasn't just that. 90% of emergency admissions, whether it be somebody having an MI, myocardial infarction or a heart attack or a stroke, they were having these events in their own homes, right? Now, that is something that we just absolutely have to make sure that people are aware that the NHS is open for business and people do go there in what is clearly the second wave, which is ramping up, right? So thank you, Vanessa. So this is about type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes. Hello, Ben. How you doing, mate? Hope you're well. It's really important that you guys look at the link in the comments about this just before we get the interview started. The link is about a special conference that's happening on the 14th on World Diabetes Day that we'll let Amanda and her colleague Beth Kelly let us know about in a sec when we get them on the line. But the point of this really is I'd really like you, the 27 people watching at the moment, let's see if we can get this number up as much as possible. What I need you to do is tag people who are either diabetic or care for somebody with diabetes, because the content that's going to come in this video is going to be really, really useful for them, right? Bear in mind, even if you think you don't have diabetes, one of the things that has come out of this and the lockdown, because of the increase in sedentary lifestyle, the lack of exercise, the increased calorific intake that we're all doing as a result of being locked down for a big period of time, and also 2020 being quite disrupted, various healthcare professionals have said that there is almost a pent-up tidal wave of type 2 diabetes waiting down the line, right? So as healthcare professionals, we have an absolute obligation to speak out and help. And I think Amanda Epps did an absolutely amazing job on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop talking now, and I'd like you to basically listen to the interview that I'm going to play with Amanda. It's a 10-minute interview. Wow, Amanda's here. Hello, Amanda. How you doing? So while you're watching that, tag people that you think might be interested. Have a chat about what your knowledge is about diabetes. I'm going to have the cup of tea that I suggested you guys to make on my personal page, and I suggest you do the same things as well. And then I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by both Amanda and Beth right on cue there as well, right? So here we go. Let's have a listen.
In it. Well, next week is going to see World Diabetes Day, and in advance of it there's a special event which is taking place to those people who might be living with a condition who are or are interested in it. Amanda Epps is an adult diabetes specialist nurse, and she's on the line to tell me a little bit more.
Oops, sorry.
As you're about to find out, she has a particular reason for having an interest in diabetes as she does. Amanda, good morning, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. Let's hope it stays that way for everybody in these weird times that we've got. Now, I did say that you have this particular association with diabetes. You don't have the condition yourself, but somebody very close to you does.
Yeah, my son has type 1 diabetes. He was diagnosed when he was 7 years old. And also my brother and sister both have type 1.
Do we know what causes diabetes?
So there's multiple different types of diabetes. So you have type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune condition where the body kind of just attacks the pancreas and destroys the insulin-producing cells. And then you have type 2 diabetes, which is more about insulin resistance. And so certain people have trouble with insulin resistance. And you also have genetic types of diabetes. So there's lots and lots of different types of diabetes.
Now, you mentioned that you've got diabetes in more than one person in your family. So is that genetic? Is it part of your son's makeup?
You are predisposed. You could be predisposed to getting type 1 diabetes, but usually something will trigger that response. So you're not necessarily going to get it just because your family member has it, but you are high risk.
Now, lots of people know the term diabetes. It does get talked about quite a lot. The word insulin gets talked about quite a lot. From your point of view, professionally, as a specialist nurse, do people really understand the effect of diabetes on people? Or are we sort of walking around this kind of with blinkers on?
I think there are lots of people living with diabetes, and I think lots of people don't understand the different types of diabetes, and so sometimes things are misunderstood in the media, and I think we need to raise awareness, and that's what World Diabetes is all about.
So World Diabetes Day takes place next Saturday. The 14th of November is the date for the diary. What's going to be going on?
So there's a United with Diabetes conference, and that's at 9:30 in the morning. It's virtual, obviously. We can't all get together. And it's all about learning about how to control your health and your diabetes journey. So there's virtual theatres that go through understanding diabetes, managing diabetes, living with diabetes, and the diabetes community. There's a tech sort of dropping zone where you can learn about all the different gadgets and see demonstrations. And there's also networking rooms where they can all have conversations. So,
Amanda, it sounds as though this particular conference is preaching to the converted. It's an event for people who've either got diabetes or work in the medical sector and perhaps have a particular interest in diabetes. Are you saying that actually the people who've got diabetes are some of the people who don't know what to expect and don't know what support's out there for them?
I think when you live with diabetes, the more education you can get, the better. Great conferences like this are fantastic. They're free, and you can learn all about your condition.
And that's an important thing. Otherwise, where do people find out about diabetes? Does it take conferences like this?
We have diabetes specialist nurses. I run a forum for diabetes specialist nurses. There's like 1,600. You can get advice from your GP. There are well-known charities like Diabetes UK, Diabetes Wellness Research Foundation, who's actually doing this United with Diabetes conference. All sorts of places.
Is it possible to have diabetes without realising it? Or at least...
Yes, absolutely.
Really?
Type 2 diabetes, or there are 232 million adults currently undiagnosed in the world. So,
good Lord.
Yeah, so 1 in 10 people are living with diabetes. There's 463 million adults expected to rise to 578 million adults by 2030, and that's one of the statistics from World Diabetes Day Awareness Campaign.
Do we know why that figure is going up at such a rate? Is it something to do with the way we live our lives?
Potentially, sometimes some types of diabetes there might be an impact on diet and lifestyle, which might cause an increased risk of those types of diabetes. But type 1 diabetes is autoimmune condition, and that's increasing as well, and we don't know why.
Okay, so the way in which we live our lives could certainly be a factor. I want to sort of take this down to baseline level, if I can. I've had a tub of porridge with plenty of sugar in it this morning because I have, on occasions, a bit of a sweet tooth. I've got a satsuma, which I've been consuming since the show started this morning. If I was somebody living with diabetes, what would eating something which is admittedly full of natural sugars, like a satsuma, what would that do to me?
So it depends what type of diabetes you have again. If you have type 1 diabetes, any sugar that you consume, you need to replace the insulin that your body's not going to make. So if you don't produce insulin, you need to inject insulin. So for the porridge or the satsuma, you would probably need to inject some insulin.
Wow.
People with type 2 diabetes, it's more like insulin resistance, and so they might take tablets. They're on insulin as well, but they might take tablets to make them more sensitive to the insulin that they produce.
And having these injections on a regular basis, I used to work with somebody actually in radio who had to inject himself with insulin on a fairly regular basis, and it was a very strange experience until we got used to it, where we'd walk into the studio and suddenly found him with his trousers round his ankles, and then we'd understand why, because he'd got an EpiPen out, he'd got a syringe in, and if he didn't take the insulin injections at a certain precise point, he could be in real trouble. Do you think society recognises the circumstances of diabetes, which is now seen to be a very common thing? Do we treat people who live with diabetes in the right way now?
I think the media sometimes can mix up the types of diabetes. So your friend would have had type 1 diabetes, and so that's who need to be thinking about this every minute of their life. Like my son, wake up in the morning, do a blood sugar, see what that is. If it's high, we need to correct it with insulin. We need to work out how many carbohydrates in his food. We then need to work out how much insulin we need for those carbohydrates. Then we need to find out what's he going to be doing for the day. Is he going to be doing sport? Is he going to go and walk to school? We need to adjust the insulin, depending on what's happening there. And then same again at lunchtime, same again at dinner time, same again if we then snack.
So this is a condition which is truly invasive into the way that somebody lives their lives. And by extension, you may be a professional in your own right, but you're also a mum. So this dominates your existence as well as your sons and the other family members that have got it.
Absolutely. I don't think I've had a full night's sleep since he was 7.
Is that right? Good Lord. Good Lord. OK, well, you've got World Diabetes Day taking place on Saturday, November the 14th. If there are people who are living with diabetes and their families, if there are people who want to know more about diabetes, dare I say it, if there are people who've got suspicions that maybe they are living with diabetes without having had any diagnosis of it, where do people join in with this particular conference that's taking place, and how do they do that, Amanda?
So they just need to pop along to unitedthroughdiabetes.com and register for the event, and then come and see us on the 14th. It starts at 9:30 online, and you can see me. I'm doing a session.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
United Through Diabetes. Did you say .com or .com? Yeah. UnitedThroughDiabetes.com. Amanda, it's a fascinating subject. I think we do take it for granted because the term diabetes is used quite freely. The term cancer is used quite freely. And yet we really don't understand as a general public, as a general community, the effects of diabetes. When you said you haven't had a full night's sleep for such a long time, I don't think people consider that and the ramifications of that on family life, as well as the life of the individual with diabetes. And you don't have diabetes, yet it's having a big, extensive effect on your life.
24/7. I work in diabetes and I live with diabetes. My son lives with diabetes.
Well, let's hope that we can build the awareness, build perhaps an understanding of what diabetes means in our communities, wider or otherwise. It's good to talk to you. Good luck for that session next Saturday, by the way. No nerves whatsoever. No pressure.
Thank you very much.
Take care, Amanda.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Brilliant. So I hope the people that are watching found that useful. I certainly did. I've listened to that for the second time today, all the way through. In addition to spilling tea all over my desk. Green tea, Jeanette, I think, in case you're asking. But so, Amanda, Beth, thanks so much for agreeing to do this at such hasty speed. Yeah, wow, Amanda, I had no idea. So you live with diabetes 24/7?
I do. Yes.
And you're also, obviously, you were watching on Facebook, and I haven't been able to see any of the comments yet. But have people had any questions, the people that are watching?
I've been flicking back and through, so I haven't seen the comments now.
Okay.
I don't want to mess up the audio here.
Yeah, no worries, fair enough. So, yeah. So, okay, I mean, maybe you can... And also, Beth, I mean, we've never met, and thank you for agreeing to do this last minute as well.
Well, that's fine.
So, what kind of problems do you both face and see on the front line, especially in a COVID sort of era?
I think... Oh, you do go first, Beth. I was going to say, I mean, a lot of the things that sort of come out is when when COVID first happened, we were having to sort of get a lot of educational sort of things out to patients really quickly as we can, so to try and keep them safe and well at home as much as possible. So, sick day rules with if they're poorly and those kinds of things that they need to look at. Now it's sort of coming out, or sort of anecdotal evidence, but some data is coming out that we're seeing a lot more people with type 1 being diagnosed, but also these people are presenting a lot later to secondary care, so A&E or GP or anything, a lot later, because they're worried obviously about going to those places, possibly due to COVID. So a lot of the work at the moment is sort of trying to raise awareness of symptoms of diabetes and try and encourage people to get to the doctors, the GPs or A&E and things if they are experiencing those, to get help as soon as they can.
Sure, and Tamsin, your name is even better, Tamsin. I wasn't told it was Tamsin Liesel Fletcher Salt by Amanda. She just made a comment on Facebook saying, thanks, I also live with type 1 diabetes for the last 42 years. And Vicky underneath says, not delaying, Vicky Alabrabra, I can't say it properly, but not delaying seeking advice for the T's of diabetes. So Beth, you said a couple of things there really good, which is one is about the need for education and awareness in terms of what the symptoms are. And the second thing that you said also was in terms of building confidence in the system that people can go to the NHS when required. So could you explore those two bits a little bit more? And, Amanda, feel free to chip in as well.
The symptoms, you mean?
Yeah. Just absolutely. What kind of symptoms?
So the symptoms of diabetes, there's sort of the main campaign is that the 4 T's. So we would say, thirst, and that's an unquenchable thirst. Tiredness, so feeling tired all the time. And again, it's not just tired because, you've been to the gym and you've done a day at work, although we're not going to gyms at the moment, but it's not that kind of tiredness. It's a really, really horrible tiredness, and it doesn't go away with a good night's sleep. The toilet a lot, so especially at night time. And getting thinner is the other T, so they're the 4 T's. So losing weight, so that's unintentional weight loss. So losing weight, even if you're, and that's that you're not trying to lose really. So they're the 4 T symptoms. Other symptoms of diabetes that can include would be like urine infections or frequent infections such as skin infections, boils, or any kind of infection. If you've got any wounds and they're taking quite a long time to heal. Those kinds of things just to be aware of, and blurry vision is quite a common one as well.
Sure, and sorry to cut you off there, I was just wondering, can you understand why people do want to almost bury their head in the sand a little bit when it comes to when they're even the topic of diabetes is broached with them?
Yeah, because a big part of it is, there's a massive stigma around diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes. And unfortunately, the stigma that comes from it in the media, that everyone that's got diabetes is because they're overweight and they don't eat healthily and they're not following a healthy lifestyle. Well, as DSN, so diabetes specialist nurses that work with people with diabetes, that's not always the case. Like Amanda said in the thing, there's a massive genetic history, and that's for all the types of diabetes. But the stigma and things that's attached to it, people feel guilty and like it's their fault, so they're likely not to go to their GP or seek help and advice. And those symptoms as well, a lot of busy people will put those down to just working hard. Like I said, and mums, we're doing school runs and we're all over the place, so a lot of people will just think, it's just because I'm busy. And so type 2 diabetes can take quite a long time to diagnose because people just put up with those symptoms for a long time. So whereas with type 1 diabetes, there's more dramatic. So you might see weight loss really quickly over a short period of time, and the thirst just unquenchable. And people can get really quite sick when they're first diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And that's a big thing that we're seeing at the moment, is people are late presentation to A&E in diabetic ketoacidosis, which is really dangerous if somebody is not diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Quick enough,
sure,
they can end up in hospital.
I can completely understand that, and I can relate to that because I've seen enough of those people coming in, sadly, crashing in through the doors of the various emergency departments that I've frequented over the years. So I can completely understand that. And, I guess a question to both of you and also your colleagues that are on the line that are putting some really valid comments. I think Tams had said something about how there's also then the fear of injections. That's another layer of why people don't want to get diagnosed or involved. But to what degree, to all four of you, do you think that the medical profession needs to step up and counter some of that media portrayal in terms of how that has undoubtedly led to the stigma and the oversimplification of you're fat, you're diabetic, you need to go and lose weight, which is absolutely, as you both have very well alluded to, is completely not true in many people's cases. Yes, it's a contributory factor, but the degree to which it is
types.
in some types, but the degree to which it's been stigmatized in the media is quite high. So how much do you think healthcare professionals do need to speak out and use the tools that we've got to our disposal to correct some of that stigma?
Yeah, I think that's what World Diabetes Day is about. It's about raising awareness, making sure all of the myth busting in the media is, addressed, and making sure that people understand the difference between the different types and the different management of the condition. It's really important that healthcare professionals spread awareness as much as they can, and people living with diabetes spreading awareness. There's lots of people with type 1 diabetes do blogs and all different types of things to raise awareness so that people understand the differences and what it's really like to live with a condition, either type. Yeah, it's easy for us because it's easy for us to say because we work in diabetes 24/7. So for us, it's easy for us to highlight, but we do understand that people like GPs, for example, they have to know a little bit about a lot of things.
Yeah.
So it is important just that each GP surgery, for example, might have a lead GP in diabetes, but just because they have a lead doesn't mean that all of the other GPs in that practice and things can upskill in diabetes. I think a lot of the problem is just that, not everybody thinks it's their thing, and so they don't really, upskill themselves or educate themselves about diabetes, and so that's where these kinds of things sit. And so it becomes like a niche sort of thing that they kind of don't want to touch so much, really. So like Amanda said, these events to raise awareness and get the messages out there and use all the platforms that we have are really good.
No, brilliant. Thank you. That's really useful. And I mean, we've got probably another 5-6 minutes left before we wrap this. What are the key messages? We'll go to all four of you. So I guess we'll start with Amanda and Beth because you're on the phone, and then Tamsin and was it Vicky? It was Vicky. I can get the first name right, Vicky. Yeah. But then you can kind of put what your key take homes are as well. So I mean, Amanda, what's your key take home message that you'd want to get across to people that watch this video?
So, look out for the signs of diabetes, the 4 T's: toilet, tired, thirsty, thinner. Make sure if you are experiencing any of those symptoms that you get a check for diabetes. If it's somebody younger, there may be, or even older, different type 1 diabetes can be diagnosed at any age, but it's more common in sort of young adults and children. If your child is experiencing any of those symptoms and they're losing weight and you don't know what's wrong, get them checked before it gets to the point of diabetic ketoacidosis.
Brilliant. And what does that check involve, Amanda, for people that are watching the
Just the blood sugar. Just go to the hospital, go and have a blood sugar check. It's 10 seconds. 1 drop of blood from a finger prick on a blood glucose meter will tell you if that blood sugar is high. Obviously, to diagnose diabetes, there'd be further checks, but that's going to give them an idea in GP surgery if that person needs to go to the hospital.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Beth, what's your thoughts?
Is this just about a take-home message of diabetes about anything?
Yeah, anything you want.
I think I would kind of give a shout out to maybe healthcare professionals and just kind of say, if you are looking after people with diabetes, seeing these people, just, do a little bit of reading around the subject, understand just different types of diabetes like we've alluded to. There's loads of different types, and it's not just as easy as type 1 is children, type 2 is adults, and they're the overweight ones, that kind of thing. Have a really good read around, and there's some really good subjects. Language Matters is a really good material out there for if you're looking after people with diabetes. But just have a really good read about that and have a think about the language you're using with people, the stigma you're attributing to either of the types of diabetes that people might have, and just look at kind of the language you're using and what sort of things you're putting on to people with diabetes.
Brilliant. No, that's a really good shout out indeed, because like those healthcare professionals, a lot of my friends and colleagues are on the front line and are suffering, and it's difficult times. So yeah, that's a great shout in terms of a shout out to them. So thank you for that. And one kind of comment and a bit of a question came in, and obviously while I'm keen to do these because we're living in the virtual world and I think it's really important, I think it's also really important to caveat it in terms of none of this constitutes medical advice. But I think it's important to talk about the themes, and Richard made a comment in terms of, it goes, my nan developed type 2 diabetes. She'd been on steroids for many years, rheumatoid arthritis, and then he went down saying, I don't know if her medication caused it. And Richard, yeah, to that point, it could have done, right, potentially, but it
increases your insulin resistance, and we do see a lot of people who've been on steroids, especially if it's the sort of cancer treatment where it's long-term steroids, or respiratory disorders with long-term steroid use. It does increase your insulin resistance and can lead to diabetes.
But then equally, there's it's a difficult balancing act, isn't it? Because the steroids are given, as Richard said, for his mum's rheumatoid arthritis. And, you know, I know how, personally I don't know, but I've seen family members with it in terms of seeing how disabling. Like, we don't see patients with rheumatoid hands like this anymore because, thankfully, there's DMARDs and there's medications out there that prevent that. But the healthcare professionals that do give steroids, I'm sure there's always the balancing act between they're giving it for that acute reason because they have to. But certainly I can remember this morning I posted something on LinkedIn about I found some heart failure medical education revision notes that I'd done. And it's a bit of a tangential thing, but obviously there is a link between diabetes and heart failure. So why not talk about it? But I can remember at medical school as well about steroids, how we had it drilled into us that, you know, the dangers of long-term steroids are not to be underestimated. So is that something that you two come into common contact with your practice? Do you see this a lot?
Yeah, I mean, steroid-induced diabetes is really quite common, and usually those people that are taking steroids would have quite high blood sugar levels and would need usually some quite intense treatment. And we normally would end up having insulin, or sometimes just oral medications that we would use, but normally they would have insulin. So in a similar way, you know, again, these people have got diabetes through absolutely no fault of their own, but they would be labelled as, you know, that kind of stigmatised sort of scenario. Yeah. They've got it from the tablets that they're taking, and they're quite complex people to manage. And like you said, you've got to manage the symptoms of the other autoimmune conditions alongside the diabetes, so they are quite complex people to manage. Especially on the days where they're not taking the steroids, and if you still give them the insulin on the days when they're not taking the steroids, and they end up with hypoglycemia, it can be really quite tricky to manage those people.
100%. Yeah. And I tell you, sorry, go on, Beth, go on.
I was going to say, reducing dose steroids cause havoc because obviously they're seen sometimes in A&E, put on a reducing dose of steroids, but nobody thinks to let the diabetes specialist nurse know perhaps, and so the patient's reducing their steroids but on insulin, and so eventually there's going to be a mismatch there somehow. So yeah, they are quite complex, and they need a lot of sort of daily interaction with a diabetes specialist nurse to get that support.
Sure. No, they're really complex. You're right, and I tell you what, the point to wrap up on for you two is, firstly, thank you for agreeing to this. You know, last minute, Amanda, you got a kind of first a LinkedIn message saying, "Do you fancy doing this?" Then a phone call. Then and then Beth, you didn't even get a phone call. You just got a text from Amanda saying, "Do you want to do this?" So firstly, thank you, but more importantly, as diabetic specialist nurses, thank you for the work that you do, because I tell lots of people that I come into contact with that my knowledge, when I was working in A&E and involved with the care of diabetic patients, it was literally the number of times that I wrote in the notes, sliding scale overnight or over the weekend until diabetic nurse review in the morning, right? And that was the sum total of my knowledge, right? I'll put my hands up.
I've seen that many times.
Yeah, and maybe it might, I've done a shift down at Medway once, right, and I was a locuming in A&E or surgery or wherever it was, and all I can do is apologise for that, but also thank you for the work that you do, because I know that diabetic patients out there are getting a gold, absolutely stellar service, and there is a big education piece that we need to do, and this is hopefully plays a small part in plugging that gap. So I hope you both have a lovely Sunday afternoon, and I really wish you well for your conference, and I'd encourage anybody who watches this video to click on it, register, see what you think, and you never know, some good might come of you attending and increasing knowledge and education around it. So thank you both so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
See you later.
And we'll do it again sometime soon. So thanks so much. Take care, and I'll see you guys really soon.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.